It's time for another Out of Bounds Rewind with Bo Bounds on ESPN 105.9, The Zone.
Mike D, so many times when teams march to the Super Bowl, their quarterback has to have some kind of big moment on the way. And there's nothing wrong with this, but Jalen Hurts hasn't had to. They pulled the Giants. He didn't need to do any kind of, heroics in the fourth quarter. San Francisco comes in with the third-string QB. They knocked him out early, and Philly did what they needed to do. Now, Patrick Mahomes has had those big stage, big moments. Kudos to Hurts that they're there. What do you think, considering he hasn't really had to struggle yet in his career in the playoffs, but they're in the Super Bowl? How do you handicap that going into Sunday's game, Mike D?
To me, that's irrelevant because there's a different journey to get to the Super Bowl each and every year or through the playoffs. And sometimes it's just who you're playing, and you don't have to have that. But you're right that in most cases you see that with a team. But I've never kind of put that as something I watch for because sometimes it's a defense that'll carry you or the running game carries you. The one thing come playoff time to always keep in mind is playing great defense in a running game carries during playoff time.
Yes.
That part is always there. Despite all the talk we make about throwing the football and the pitch and catch part of it, if you can play great run defense and you can run the football, you're going to win a ton of games. And that carries a long way, the physicality of the game. And you see that with the Eagles. Their ability to run the football when they need to and have to. Their offensive line is the best in pro football when it's healthy. No question about it. And when you look at how they can get after the quarterback, they had 70 sacks this year, 15 more than any other team in the NFL. And their ability to clog things up inside against the run. So Jalen hasn't had that moment. I think come Sunday he'll have to because of who he's playing. And you got a lot of young kids in the secondary for the Chiefs. You can't say they're rookies, not this far into the first season, because they played a lot of football. But, they still young back there, and you're going to have some errors. You're going to have some mistakes. And when you got an A.J. Brown and a Dallas Goedert and a Devontae Smith, you got to take full advantage of it. You got to go after them. I didn't think Burrow had his best game, certainly, against Kansas City. A lot of that had to do with pressure, immense pressure coming after him. And when you're down three starters along the offensive line, you're not going to match up well against anyone. But I thought the most dominant player on the field was Chris Jones. Chris looked like he was more in the backfield than any of the Bengals running backs. I mean, he was back there with Joe virtually every play. And it didn't matter where they put him, at defensive tackle and defensive end. What's interesting is when you kind of study the career of Frank Clark, who they got from Seattle, Clark's been what I would say is a good NFL player throughout the regular season. Where he's been great, postseason. And he has really excelled again this year. They had some real difficulties with Jones and Clark blocking either one of them. And I think that's going to be a little different situation this coming Sunday because of who they're up against. That offensive line, that's not the Bengals they're playing. So I thought that was a big reason why Joe did not seem – he missed on a couple of throws. But when you got people bearing down on you on every play, it's difficult sometimes. But, Bo, you think about it, didn't that game basically go into overtime because the punter, instead of either punting the ball directionally toward the sidelines or hanging one up in the air and letting his team get under it, he punts one straight to the punter. The punter punts one straight to the return man, and he takes off downfield with it.
Yeah.
And then you get a 15-yard penalty, not being smart. And I thought Osai had a really good game. It just, for whatever reason, he sort of lost it. It's an aggressive game. You going after the quarterback. I get it, but you got to be smart there, the way they protect the quarterback today. It came down to two plays. A punt. Now, I can't believe that's really wanted to do with the punt, because you don't hang one that Moore can bring that thing back. And secondly, you got to pull up. You have to be able to pull up at the sidelines today with a quarterback. You might not like it, but that's just the way they call the game today. That game was basically going to go into overtime. There's no way that kicker's hitting a 55-yard field goal.
Right.
Not in those conditions. He barely made the one he made. So, again, I think the Eagles' offensive defensive line are a different breed than what you played against Cincinnati. Really, I mean, Cincinnati's defensive line's okay, but they no match for what the Eagles have up front, and their offensive line, they're not even in the same zip code as what the Eagles' offensive line is. So it's a little different game plan on how you're going to attack them, and it should be interesting because for me it would be an easy pick. When you're that much better offensive defensive line, I would go with the Eagles in a heartbeat, and I still am. But they do have Mahomes on the other side.
All right, speaking of, he doesn't have the supporting cast that he's had. He still has Kelsey and some other pieces, but Tyreek is gone, Tyreek Hill and so on. So he doesn't have the supporting cast he has had, although he's still magnificent. How does that factor in for you on Sunday, Mike?
Well, the thing that would keep me up at night if I am the Eagles would be, how do I match up against Kelsey? Because that, to me, would because I think I can play a lot of man and occasionally maybe swing somebody over outside. But how do I match up against Kelsey? Because he's like another receiver. He plays tight end, but he's a big receiver. Who do I have to match up against him? A lot of people, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And listen, C.D. Deuce is a good player, but he can't match up against Kelsey, play in, play out. He's not that good of a cover guy. You're going to have to bracket him. You're going to have to be able to bracket him. And so that would be the one area that would give me great concern. Because I think their corners are really good. Bradbury and Big Play Slay.
Big Play Slay.
Man, those guys can match up well.
He's my guy.
Come on. They better than what the Bengals have at corner. And so, but it's also, too, about pressure. And how do I do that to go after Mahomes? One of the things I would do is slip that tape on how the Bucks played them on Super Bowl Sunday. That was about as confused as I've seen Mahomes during his career. And a lot of it had to do with they kept the big man. I thought Vita Vea played a big game part in that because he stayed inside and he forced Mahomes to run east and west. He didn't give him that lane to take off running with the football. And when you have a defense that can put that much pressure on a quarterback, it drives you nuts. Because even as talented as he is to get to the outside, man, they blow up your launch pad.
Mike Detillier.
They completely blow it up.
Absolutely. Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. It's going to be an exciting Super Bowl. We have Mississippi players all over the field, or with Mississippi ties. So that's super exciting.
Don't miss one moment of the Out of Bounds Show with Bo Bounds. Weekdays, 7 a.m. till 10 a.m. on ESPN 105.9. The Zone.